Hello and welcome to Mangatory 96, and today we have the review of One Piece manga chapter 1047 titled The Skies Above the Capital. What this chapter showed us is that Luffy doesn't subscribe to the notion that bigger isn't necessarily better, quite the opposite actually. In addition, contrary to popular belief about Garp's parenting skills or their lack of, he did at least manage to teach Luffy the meaning behind his epithet Garp the Fist, which Luffy clearly took to heart. Also, as Erten indicates that this could easily be Luffy's finisher to beat Kaido, which would mean that at the end of the day, the solution that Oda and Luffy came up with to beat Kaido is punching him really hard. But I doubt that anyone will complain if this really ends up happening. In other news, it seems that we have another case of mistakes in identifying devil fruits, as it appears that Orochi is actually a cockroach as opposed to a mythical snake monster, considering he doesn't die no matter what you do. Now, let's save all that for later and start at the beginning of this week's chapter. One Piece is once again leading the line in the group magazine cover, which is sport team this time, with Luffy being in a football jersey holding a Champions League football. This is quite a nice coincidence, considering that I'm currently binge reading the hell out of Aoashi. I'm just going to say that it's a fantastic sport manga about football, which I highly recommend that you should read. Anyway, One Piece has also a color spread this week where we see the Straw Hats plus Momo in his dragon form relaxing on the beach. It's a nice car, but what's sad about it is that this is the best of Momo that we see in this chapter, as he really didn't cover himself in glory in this chapter. So, going into the chapter, we start with Momo and Yamato, who is trying to make him finally move his ass and do what he is supposed to do. This leads us to a brief flashback on what happened in the burning Oden castle moments before Momo and the other scabbards were sent to the future. This flashback deals with how Toki and Kinemon finally convinced Momo to travel to the future, as he was just a sniveling mess at the time. To clarify, I have no problem with Momo's portrayal in this flashback, my problem lies on his behavior in the present. I know that he is mentally an 8-year-old child, but at the same time he experienced more than some would in their whole lives. So is it too much to ask for him to shut up for 30 seconds and do what he is supposed to do? As we all know that at the end of the day he will pull through, so all this whining from him is really unnecessary at this point. But Momo's behavior isn't even the worst part about this chapter, as the way that Kinemon convinced Momo to go to the future was the overused speech of samurai choosing to die in battle. In addition, we got something similar with Hyogoro and some no-name samurai a bit later in the chapter. What annoys me most about this samurai speech is that after almost 4 years of Wano, where we constantly bombarded with Wano's samurai saying the same things over and over again on how much they are willing to die in order to free Wano, and after all of this, what do we have? One big nothing. Nobody of note has died, and yet they still are showing this empty resolve in our faces almost every damn time a samurai is on panel. At this point, this is reaching fake out death's level of annoying. To be clear, I have no problem with characters not dying in the slightest. If Oda doesn't want to kill characters, then that's fine. But where I have a problem with this is if you don't want to kill anyone, then why do you write them in a situation where they should have died in the first place? If Oda didn't do this constantly, I wouldn't have any problem with the lack of deaths in One Piece. The same can be said about this samurai resolve. If it's shown constantly to us and nothing happens in the end, then yeah, I'm really annoyed by it, and at this point nothing would make me happier than for those samurais that have a death wish to finally have their wish fulfilled. Anyway, let's move on from this little rant about the samurai's pathetic death wish that won't be fulfilled at the end of the day and move to something more exciting and good. Luffy vs Skydo is definitely that, as Luffy chose the lightning bolt from the last chapter at Kaido. I must say that I'm a little bit disappointed with Kaido in this scene, as he dodges the lightning bolt as opposed to taking it head on like a man. But I guess he isn't as willing to take hits from someone who plays in his league as supposed when he is dealing with scrubs. What a chicken. Either way, with him dodging, he manages to once again send Luffy flying with his kanabo. Luffy uses another lightning in the sky to have a little pole dance routine. His performance was definitely electric. Before flinging himself back to Kaido to counter, but he is met with the kanabo instead. In that exchange, Kaido has an interesting piece of dialogue where he confirms that Roger didn't have a devil fruit and that you don't need devil fruit powers to conquer the world if your haki is just that good. Well, this statement has a lot of truth to it. However, I don't think that Kaido is the best person to give it, as let's not lie to ourselves, it's not like he isn't using his devil fruit powers. Quite the opposite actually, as he is relying on his powers as much as haki, if not more. So, while this statement does sound a lot of truth, it would have been more impactful if it came from someone like Rayleigh, Garp or Shanks as opposed to someone so reliant on his devil fruit as Skydo. Anyway, Luffy uses his powers to bounce from the ground, but once again he is met by Kaido's Kanabo instead, which hits him really hard this time, losing a couple of teeth in the process. However, this isn't enough to finish off Luffy, who grabs Kaido's skin, turns it into rubber and holds it for dear life, in order for Kaido not to be able to avoid the attack that Luffy is preparing next. But Kaido doesn't want to do so, so he tries with his wind blades in order to see if Luffy is still vulnerable to slash attacks. The answer to that is yes, but it will take more than that for Luffy to let go of Kaido. Then we briefly move to the flower capital, where we see the citizens letting the lanterns fly in the sky with their wishes. Meanwhile, Kaido changes his approach, so he tries with his Boro Breath to make Luffy to let go. But despite it hitting it, it's still not enough for Luffy to let go. Then we get the aforementioned scene with Hyo and the other samurai in the life lore. As I said enough about them earlier, so there really isn't much to talk about them in this scene. On the other hand, we get a bit of Usopp, who is getting swept away by Zunisha's water, with his mindset being completely different than that of the samurai. That is one of the many reasons why he is so much better than any of the samurais. Anyway, we see a bit of what is happening with Orochi and Hiyori. There was quite the development in the time that we weren't focusing on them, as it seems that by all the shaking that Onigashima is going through right now it helps Orochi. As the sea stone nail that Hiyori used to stab him in order to seal his devil fruit power came off, that way he turned into the Yamato no Orochi while still burning. But what is of note in this scene is that he only has one head while he is transformed. So could that mean that if he were to get his head cut off right now, would he die for good? It's hard to tell with him, as he is more of a cockroach than a Yamato no Orochi, but if nothing else, this is surely the last chance for Denjiro to show up and do something. As it stands now, it doesn't seem that Hiyori will be capable of cutting Orochi's head off, so everything is on Denjiro. After that, we get confirmation that Onigashima is still moving towards the flower capital, despite the flame clouds weakening every second. Then we get Momo's and Yamato's reaction to the attack that Luffy has been preparing for half of the chapter, with the intention to be the finishing move to beat Kaido. For the last scene of the chapter, we get an epic double-page spread of Luffy's giant fist emerging from the clouds. Saying that it's giant is an understatement, considering that in a panel we see that Luffy's fist is comparable to the size of whole Onigashima. Granted, Onigashima did lose some land mass while traveling, but still it doesn't change the fact that this fist is enormous beyond belief. With Luffy riding himself to finish off Kaido and leaving the people on Onegashima's safety in Momo's hands, we end this chapter. Now, Luffy being able to turn his fist so gigantic does open a lot of possibilities or speculations. Is this the biggest that he can get, or can he get even bigger, potentially reaching Zunisha's proportions or even bigger? Can he only make a single limb this big, or can he turn into an even bigger giant than he was with Gomu Gomu Giant? There are a lot of questions but no answers in sight, for now at least. As for Luffy's plan, if you even wanna call it a plan, it's actually pretty decent for Luffy's standards. If you ignore the fact that he needs to rely on an 8-year-old kid that did nothing but cry and say he can do it those last couple of chapters. Apart from that, him grabbing Kaido in order for him not to be able to evade this attack, making this fuck off giant fist in the first place. In all honesty, if this doesn't do the job, then I don't know what will defeat Kaido. As I said earlier, if we exclude Momo from this equation, it's not that bad of a plan in all honesty. Now, let's assume that this is indeed the finisher and that Kaido will be defeated with this. Will this fight end in the next chapter? Considering that I'm sure that we will definitely waste some panels before Momo finally moves his ass, that Orochi has to be dealt with at least a couple of pages before Kaido. That means that we have to wait for Denjiro's arrival, hopefully, which would make Kaido getting defeated in the next chapter a bit difficult. Not impossible, but difficult nonetheless. So I do think that it's more realistic to assume that Kaido will be defeated in chapter 1049 as opposed to the next chapter, that is, if we don't get a Kaido flashback right before he gets defeated. All in all, this was an alright chapter of One Piece. Momo's constant whining and reading about the samurai's way did hamper this chapter a bit in my eyes. Despite Luffy being on the verge of pulling off one of the strongest, if not the strongest attack that we have seen to date. And that'll be all for this video. If you like this video, leave a like, leave your thoughts in the comments below, or subscribe to the channel for more One Piece content, as well as other manga content, and until next time, take care.